looks like, what happened to my monitor? There we go. Come on. There we go. Okay. Phew. I think I got it. Looks like we're live. So I will just take a few minutes to do my little introduction here and wait for people who are joining us to filter on in. If you are joining us today in the webinar, by all means, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. Tell us where you're from and why you're here today, or if you're affiliated with any of our liaise groups, we'd love to hear about that too. For those of you who are members of our liaise groups, we also have just recently put together a secular calendar. So I'm actually going to go ahead and share. Oh, it looks like Lindsay's already sharing it, of course. But it's a great little way to find out what's happening in your neck of the woods. I saw a post by somebody on the Arizona Atheist Facebook page, and they were like, hey, I don't know how to find where things are happening. Nothing's happening. And look at all the things that are happening. There's so many things happening. So for those of you who might be joining us, oh, Jana is saying she cannot hear me. Okay, Mars says that they can hear me. So if you can't hear me, I'm guessing it might be a you problem, not a me problem. Although normally technical difficulties entirely belong to me. So if you can hear me, please let me know. If you can't, looks like I'm not seeing other people weighing in, but hopefully y'all can hear me. Okay, Gina says she can hear me. Roger, you're here. Thanks, Roger. Good. All right. So Jana, you might want to check your connections and your settings and all that good stuff, or your earbuds or whatever. I'm going to just go ahead and get us started with the introduction. Hi, Martha. Nice to see you from Scottsdale. All right. So, hi, everybody. And thanks for joining us today. We are a nonprofit organization focused on protecting the Constitution and the separation of church and state now for over a decade. We have some incredible programming, including our Friday updates from all kinds of amazing speakers. And that includes historians, authors, elected officials, journalists, you name it. Next Friday, we will be speaking with a special guest, Howard Epstein of the Arizona Housing Fund. And we will continue to talk about our unhoused neighbors and how we can help folks experiencing homelessness for the next few weeks. All this at a time where we are now at 28 consecutive days over 110 degrees. And while we always need your financial support to do the work that we do, I'd like to encourage you to support some great local secular groups who are working to combat homelessness in Arizona. And there are several. I'm sure probably I don't have my screen back up, but Lindsay, if you could maybe share some of those links and those wish lists into the chat, that would be really, really great. Let me get back to it. Okay, here we go. But today we're going to be speaking to, well, we were supposed to be speaking to a couple of activists for the LGBTQ community. Unfortunately, Paula had to back out at the last minute to take care of some family issues. But today that means we're going to be joined by Lili Rasmussen. Lili describes herself as a prostitute, philosopher, and a rebel. And that's the shortest bio that I've ever had to read for our Zoom discussion. So Lili, if there's anything that you would like to add to your bio, by all means, go ahead and share that. And Lili's off camera today, so you'll just be seeing my face. Lili, did I miss anything?
Nope, that's fine.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to just go ahead and kind of let you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about yourself and open, and then we are going to open it right up to questions. And again, remember, we're talking today about trans discrimination in housing. So Lili, go ahead and start us off.
Yeah, all right. So I'm trans. I wrote about 10, 15 minutes of material for you. I'm going to read through it. It'll probably sound boring because it's being read, but be grateful I'm reading it. It'll restrain my ADHD, and you can deal with that in the Q&A, okay?
Awesome.
And if I start speaking too quickly, let me know. I'll slow down. So today I'll share some of my stories, some statistics, and also spend some time pointing out how displacing people is a core component of religious power. I was born to a homeless teen and adopted shortly before 2 years old. And though there was pain in my childhood from being adopted and of course being forced into the closet as a trans child in Arizona in the 80s and 90s, in other ways I had a privileged childhood. My father was a school principal, his brother an evangelical pastor, his sisters held a master's in education, and his other sister married an attorney. And so we had economic freedom. I had a good secular, religious, and civic education, and I'm grateful for those. So I was raised strongly evangelical in my uncle's church. And in college, I pursued a degree in philosophy. And I originally picked that with an eye to take over my uncle's church one day. But my views changed philosophically. And of course, right-wing Christians have made it abundantly clear that trans and queer people aren't welcome in their denominations, and they work hard to try making us unwelcome in society at large. So while studying at U of A, the 2008 housing crisis and financial bubble happened. I was a poor student. So many people were out of work, and even in good times, Tucson doesn't exactly have a thriving job market. I couldn't find work. I didn't want to drop out of college. And I also didn't want to become homeless. So that was my first entrance into sex work. This was before my transition. And I hoped, at least in addition to paying my bills, maybe it would clear up some of the confusion I felt. You know, what am I? Because back in that time, trans people were treated not as something different from gays, but as super gay. But I never really felt particularly gay, you know. Once in a long while, I was attracted to a man, but they were all straight men and never gay men. And I mean, it was so confusing back at that time, right? Because pop education about trans people was nearly non-existent. Maybe you saw us show up on Jerry Springer, but that was about it in the media. So after a few years of doing sex work, I felt burnt out, and I began renting from a nonprofit and trying to rebuild, quote unquote, a normal life. About a year or two later, I began transitioning and began experiencing employment discrimination. A shift manager in a call center I worked at that time began harassing me frequently, but luckily the owner was a woman and trans friendly and kept them at bay. Now down the road, that bigoted shift manager opened a call center of his own close to where I lived. And while he was a bigot and we butted heads sometimes, we also knew we could make money together. And so we tried getting along, working together in his new office. But when I began taking hormones and my body started changing, other than my voice, unfortunately, it coincided with his children's summer vacation. And his kids hung around the office so he could save money on childcare. And he was uncomfortable with the questions his kids started asking him about me. And in addition to him always being a transphobe anyways, so he fired me rather than explaining trans people to his kids. And thereafter, I began, you know, attending interviews and looking for jobs. And in the interviews, I was just openly mocked and not taken seriously as a candidate because I was trans. I don't drive. I have PTSD from car accidents. We have a poorly run mass transit system, and because of that, I could only fit in maybe 2 or 3 interviews a day, interviews where I wasn't being taken seriously and I was having my time wasted. Meanwhile, my expenses were chipping away at my meager savings, and it became clear I was going to have to return to sex work. After a few weeks back at being a sex worker, I attempted suicide. I'm glad I'm still here, but at the time I felt so much pain and received so much hate for being trans, and it was just too much at that time. While there were times being a sex worker felt empowering, overall I felt like I've been molested by thousands of men to earn a living at that time of my life. And perhaps I could have left sex work earlier when public knowledge or attitudes about trans people began changing. But at the time I felt broken from sex work. I felt like I'd already crossed lines I never wanted to cross, and that bell couldn't be unrung. So leaving sex work sooner or later wouldn't make a difference in that aspect. It was a broken and unhealthy attitude, but nonetheless, that's how I felt at the time. And regarding homelessness, from renting from nonprofits to living in hotels as a prostitute, I've spent a sizable chunk of my adult life legally homeless, even though I had a roof over my head and a semi-stable existence. Finding nonprofits I could rent from to rebuild was difficult. I remember one nonprofit said it was fine that I was trans, but when I showed up, they wouldn't take me because I hadn't changed my license over to female, even though I looked and lived as a woman. I look just the same as I do now, as in the photo you guys can see. I mean, other than my voice, you know, I'm 5'5" and live and look as a woman. And so there are also nonprofits here that help sex workers out of prostitution, but unfortunately, they're all religious organizations, right? They're run by Catholic charities or, you know, Protestant denominations. And so either they focused exclusively on women and didn't even have programs for men, and of course they don't view me as a woman, or they would have let me into their programs, but they would have viewed me as a wayward man who needed Jesus, salvation, and a lot of these programs, while they do offer some social services to people leaving sex work and sex trafficking, they usually include a lot of religious indoctrination, and that's not my cup of tea. Why would I want to be indoctrinated by the people who've been abusing me so much? And I remember, let's see. Nonetheless, I remember one program that helped sex workers refuse me, and a couple weeks later, I was raped by a client. If that charity had taken me in and not been a religious supremacist, I wouldn't have been raped. And so I resent organized religion for that, for so much abuse, discrimination, and housing insecurities I face. And it should also be noted that secular organizations should form to rival religious charities. Religious charities don't have to have a monopoly on helping the poor and colonizing their minds, right? Secular people can step in, provide services, provide competition in that space of society. And I think that's something that could improve. And then I have some statistics here on trans people. So nationwide, 1 in 5 trans people has been homeless. 1 in 10 trans people have been evicted from their homes for being trans. 20 to 40% of homeless youth are LGBT. And those two statistics come from transequality.org. And then in 2015, there was a massive nationwide survey called the US Transgender Survey. They have another one coming out this year. They're still processing all the data of it. But under the category of income and employment status, and these statistics are for Arizona specifically, 16% of respondents in Arizona were unemployed, 28 were living in poverty, employment, and the workplace. 15% of respondents who have ever been employed reported losing a job in their lifetime because of their gender identity or expression. In the past year, 27% of those who held or applied for a job during that year reported being fired, being denied a promotion, or not being hired for a job they applied for because of their gender identity or expression. Respondents who had a job in the past year reported being verbally harassed at a rate of 10% and sexually harassed at a rate of 1% at work because of their gender identity or expression. 21% of those who had a job in the past year reported other forms of mistreatment based on their gender identity or expression during that year, such as being forced to use a restroom that didn't match their gender identity, being told to present in the wrong gender in order to keep their job, or having a boss or coworker share private information about their transgender status with others without their permission. On that note, I have a friend who recently had a sex reassignment surgery, and when she came back to work, she could tell that people knew that's what she had done, even though only her direct supervisor knew. And so they had been gossiping about that while she was gone. Anyway, overall, 28% of respondents who had a job in the past year reported being fired, denied a promotion, or expressing some form of mistreatment related to their gender identity. And then for Arizona, housing, homelessness, and shelter access, 27% of respondents experienced some form of housing discrimination in the past year, such as being evicted from their home or being denied a home or apartment because of being transgender. 32% have experienced homelessness at some point in their lives. 14% experienced homelessness in the past year because of being transgender. 32% of respondents who experienced homelessness in the past year avoided staying in a shelter because they feared being mistreated as a transgender person. And then I think displacing people is a core pillar of organized religion. Artificial scarcity is a norm of organized power, whether that power be secular, religious, familial, monarchy, or other political renditions. From the Romans expelling the Jews from Israel for theopolitical disobedience, to the partition of India, displacing Muslims and Hindus as the land divided between India and Pakistan, to Buddhist extremists expelling the Muslim Rohingya in Myanmar. Displacing people is part and parcel of religious power. It's also the original sin of this country. In 1492, the Spanish crown issued the Edict of Alhambra, which offered the Jews and the Moors of Spain the ultimatum to convert, die, or leave. Flush with the lands and properties of displaced peoples, the Spanish crown took a gamble on Christopher Columbus's voyage to the New World and the carnage it unleashed upon Indigenous Americans. It's also worth noting that just as the US system has asset forfeiture that seizes the belongings of criminals, so too did Inquisition courts of the Catholic Church, as well as witch trials in England and the US. Slaves are homeless as they were denied even free reign over the home of their body. The Southern Baptist Convention broke away from Northern Baptists to maintain a pro-slavery religion. Vine Deloria, a Native American scholar and advocate, spoke of how when the policy was to kill the savage but save the man with Christian indoctrination and Western education, that reservations were treated as exclusive domains to particular denominations. So this reservation over here, only Presbyterian missionaries could go to that one. This reservation over there, only Catholic missionaries could go to that one. So they were given religious monopolies over missionary activities on reservations. Those incarcerated on reservations are not free and they're not housed. Christian extremists in this country who try criminalizing LGBT people should be seen for what they are, not what they've accomplished so far. They are economic extortionists, religious gangsters, and mental and literal colonists trying to expand their influence at the threat of comply or suffer. Homelessness is bondage because it implies that one is not free to live in the world unless bound by the agreement of those in power. And I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge there are people of good faith. I had some help me when I struggled. But I think that though their hearts might be in the right place, they very often don't buck against the power systems that they are part of. You know, they're kind of outliers, or though they do good in their own lives, they're still complicit with the organized religion and what it does with their ties in the communities they're a part of building. And so I'm going to wrap up this little part with a poem I wrote after I left sex work, and I was trying to deal with, I wrote a bunch of poems, but this one was trying to deal with having clients who were clergy who I knew were part of transphobic religions, and they would preach hate towards people like me in the pulpit, and yet they would come see me as a prostitute. And so it goes, in your moments of ecstasy, was I too blind to see? Were you the face of God next to me? Sinful priest naked in my bed, begging, praying for some head. Hairish ties within my purse, your clammy old hands a hooker's purse. When we're done, will you forgive my sin, or will you pay to go again? In your ecstasy, I wondered where God could be. Were you the face of God I was meant to see? So thank you. We can do Q&A.
Wow. You shared that poem with me before, but like it, I, of course, because of the work that I do, you know, I'm always like plugged into this stuff, whether I want to be or not, you know, and, you know, I'm sure you probably do too, but there's some, you know, Twitter users that I follow, who are every day exposing the, you know, child sexual abuse that happens within various religious organizations. I mean, we just finished a whole, you know, series of discussions with people. And I mean, I would need every finger and every toe of my own and that of the people who live in my entire complex to count the number of folks that I know who have been abused in one way or another by folks in the church. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. So I'm going to go ahead and say right now, for those of you who are here, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them into the chat. You know, there's a lot of people that look at sex work disdainfully. Of course, I mean, like, I do understand that there are some instances where people can have their own autonomy and be able to do that work in a safe space, you know, OnlyFans or whatever and stuff like that. But for many people, it's a matter of survival. And it's interesting to me too that you were adopted at 2. I mean, you said that your mother was a homeless teen, that you were adopted at 2 by a school principal and his wife. Is that correct?
Correct.
And that his brother was an evangelical pastor, right?
I think he still is to some degree, but he's mostly retired. Yes.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I assume they probably attended the same church. I mean, I know a lot of friends who are adopted who 9 times out of 10, they, their mothers were in really difficult situations where they just didn't have the means to be able to take care of them and ended up being adopted. And 9 times out of 10, I swear, they were adopted by evangelical Christians. And your work with folks, I mean, I'm assuming that you do some work, because I know you're a philosopher, right? And that you are a professor. So in the work
Oh,
that
I'm not a professor. No, I just have a bachelor's in philosophy.
Oh, you have a bachelor's in philosophy. Okay. So, which is also amazing, by the way, I might add, because for somebody who's had to overcome so much hardship in your life, the fact that you were able to get a degree is really impressive. So congratulations on that.
It doesn't pay the bills. I'm back in school studying cybersecurity.
Oh, okay. Well, good. I'm glad to hear that. I mean, I actually, we're going to have to continue our camaraderie, because I'm about to go back to school myself starting next week. And like, I had to log into ASU for the first time in probably 13 years or something. And I was like, what am I doing? So we can commiserate together or celebrate together, whatever it is. So in your experience and your work, do you find that it's typical for, like, I don't know if you connect with adoptees on a regular basis, but do you find that it's oftentimes folks who are religious who end up adopting folks?
I don't know if I could really speak on that, because it could also just be an observer's bias of the fact that I grew up in a very religious community and I still know, some very religious people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so you said that there really aren't any secular groups who are doing the work of helping people, get out of sex work and into something that's, above board. Is that
Not in Arizona that I've seen, and it doesn't have to be a thankless thing. I mean, charities and nonprofits can still be profitable to the people who own them and work for them. I don't know why it's not there. I'm just throwing that out there.
and we just talked to somebody from GLSEN last week. So I'm sure that the folks at GLSEN, or no, it wasn't GLSEN, I'm sorry, it's 1 in 10, and 1 in 10 help unhoused youth, right? And they have housing and things like that. So I wonder, I mean, I guess they could be considered one of the more secular groups that does that work. Although I don't know if it's like with the singular purpose of helping folks who were involved with sex work, but I know that probably many of the youth that they help at 1 in 10 had been involved in sex work at one point or another.
I imagine so.
Mm-hmm. So you mentioned artificial scarcity. Can you speak a little bit more about that as we talk about discrimination in housing and what that looks like for somebody like me who maybe not have an intimate understanding of it the way you do?
I think in our country it's a little more complicated, but say we look at Israel and Palestine. I mean, there's an artificial scarcity of land and resources in this religious ethnic war that they got going on.
Mm-hmm.
But you have the frequent wars in England for centuries between the Catholics and Protestants and dispossessing each other. I should have taken that one out. I didn't really develop that thought enough.
You're okay. I mean, it's true. I mean, like, I think about it all the time, like, hey guys, this isn't pie, like it's that we could come up with endless solutions to the issues that plague our society. And we don't have to think about it in this very capitalistic way where it's like, no, I've got to get everything that I can possibly get because it's all going to run out, So if anybody does have any questions, by all means, feel free to ask them right now. I know that we had planned for another speaker, Paula, to be here. And since she was unable to come, we might end up, freeing you a little bit. So I want to ask you, Lili, because, and I know that you've attended many of our secular speaker series in the past. So what can regular folks, like what are, just people who maybe aren't, and I don't mean to say regular, but you know what I mean, like folks who haven't had to deal with this kind of discrimination, who are concerned about the, homeless situation, and especially with the homeless situation with our LGBTQ youth and adults. What can folks like us do to try to remedy this problem?
Get out the vote. Get more Democrats in office.
And we are a nonpartisan organization, but we focus on the issues. And what tends to happen is that most of the time, the issues that we are passionate about as secularists, humanists, agnostics, and atheists, that we end up leaning to the left. But it's again, we're not partisan in any way, but it's true. Well, you're allowed to be, but we have a C3, we have a C4 status too, but we always got to be careful with that kind of stuff.
Yes.
So are you are there any elected or people who are seeking elected office that you're really excited about right now?
I have not been paying much attention. It's not really an election year, so.
It's about to be though, folks, and I'll tell you what, we are paying attention at Secular AZ, and we have been really focused on school board stuff because I feel like that is where some of the most hateful things are being said about folks who belong to the LGBTQ community. We recently started a Substack where I've been trying to torture myself so that I can give that information to all of you and learn more about how you can get involved. If Lindsay maybe could put that up there, the Substack, our speaker series, we are going to be starting our candidate forum. I don't, if you were paying attention last year during the election year, we were having school board candidate forums, usually on Wednesday nights. We'll probably continue on the same nights as much as we possibly can, because in Arizona, we have almost 300 school districts in Arizona. And in Maricopa County alone, we have 58. And in 2024, that means that there are going to be 3 seats in most districts up for grabs. Most districts have a 5-person board. And in presidential election cycles, that means that there will be 3 people who are up for re-election. If you're a smaller district, like say Wilson Elementary School District, where they only have a 3-person board, that means 2 of those people are up for re-election. I think Phoenix Union is the only one that has a 7-person board, and that means that, again, it'll be a 4-person election for that particular board. So it's really, really important that you focus on what is happening. Here's a great question from Mars. Thank you, Mars. Is there a group that compiles info on local housing and employers that are safe for trans folks? Do you happen to know this, Lily?
Housing, I don't know. Employers, I think there is an LGBT Chamber of Commerce that has that type of stuff posted.
I think you're right. There is an LGBTQ Chamber of Commerce. As a matter of fact, it was, I believe, when I went to the last Pride event, and we'll also be at the next Pride event that's happening, I believe, in October of this year. We have a table. And so we're always looking for volunteers for those kinds of things. But I do recall seeing like an LGBTQ kind of catalog of LGBTQ friendly businesses that, support the community, employ the community, and give back to the community. So there's that. Is there anything else that I may have missed, Lily? Because it does look like we're probably going to get away with getting out of here early. And I love your inspirational, like, let's all vote. Let's definitely vote locally too. We need to start from the bottom up. I mean, I barely even pay attention to what's happening at the presidential level, at the national or international level, because I'm so focused on what's going on in my backyard. So aside from voting, is there anything that we can do, especially as we're facing almost a month of, over 110-degree days?
I think that you can always put people up in shelters and hotels if you see them.
Yeah, absolutely. A friend of mine, actually, Brianna Westbrook, she just posted on her Facebook. She is a trans candidate for LD5, House of Representatives. And I know that she just moved to the Capital District. And, she said that there was an unhoused person who had passed out from the heat. And she was able to kind of, do some kind of first aid and call the paramedics so that this person could be picked up. But, I want to say that I just read an article this morning where we have 25 people who have died from some related heat ailment, and that there's another 270 something cases that still need to be investigated. But if you've walked outside.
I saw on the news the other day, the coroner had to order some extra refrigerated trucks to store the bodies while they process through them.
I mean, again, like, rather than coming up with that kind of, okay, here's what we have to do, we're going to get refrigerators for the bodies. We could maybe pull up some buses with air conditioning and water and ice or something to provide some kind of relief, or open up a church maybe, or any other kind of building. It doesn't have to be a church, but like, where is the respite for these people? Because I avoid going outside at all costs because it's ridiculously hot outside. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and call it. It's 12:30. I'm so glad that y'all were able to come. I apologize. Oh, there we go. Atheists Helping the Homeless Phoenix tomorrow morning near Burton Bar Library. Excellent. Thank you so much, Mars, who has their finger to the pulse of absolutely everything going on in our secular community. Maricopa County has heat relief centers. Good to know. So there are places for folks to be able to get some relief from this heat. But yeah, I mean, show compassion, be kind, do what you can. Thanks, Mars. You're so sweet.
I mean,
and with that, yeah, go ahead, Lily.
I mean, if you want to close it early, you can, but I was going to say, so many people don't even know a trans person. We wound up with extra time because Paul had canceled. I'm happy to just answer general trans questions people might have.
I mean, I would love that if you're open to it, Lily, because I think too, a lot of the problem with people is that they've never met anybody who's trans.
Don't overthink your questions. You don't have to be PC. I'm literally an ex-hooker. Like, you're not going to offend me. So.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I'll give it a few minutes. Okay, so you know what? I'll start with a question, because today I decided to take a look at this testimony from Chloe, whatever her name is. And so I'd like to know about, and I know that you're not an expert on this, but the right, like the GOP likes to highlight the detransitioning cases, the folks who have gone through a gender transition and who are, so could you maybe speak to that? Like, and again, I know you're not an expert, but how many, go ahead.
I feel like I know a number of trans people, both, here as well as on Facebook. And of all these trans people I'm acquainted with or know, I've only seen 2 transition. One was a hooker friend of mine, and she didn't regret her transition. What happened was she was so desperate for surgery, she went to a discount surgeon who botched her breast augmentation. They looked horrible. She had like a uniboob. It's called, what is it called? Anyway, I haven't thought of that in a while. It's synaphia, I think, where the skin of the sternum between pulls away from the sternum. So she kind of wound up with a uniboob, and she was just so depressed. She detransitioned for a while, not because she regretted it, but because she felt ugly and disheartened. But she's since dealt with those emotions and is living as a woman again, has gotten more surgeries and feels better about herself. And the only other person I know who detransitioned was a New Mexico couple. They were both trans. One was a trans woman and the other was a trans man. And they were in a horrific car accident where they rolled off a cliff. And I don't know what all was going through their minds. Maybe they genuinely regretted transitioning, or maybe it was just some quirk trauma response they were going through. I don't know, but it's not very common.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the right proposes it as if it's something that happens like in nearly every single case, and it's a much smaller percentage. We do have a question here from Michelle, and I don't know if you'll be able to answer this, Lily, but are there any local services or organizations that you've heard are especially helpful or fair in providing services to trans folks?
Services like in what aspect?
She's not specific. She says local services or orgs so providing services, I'm assuming like, housing or maybe employment services or things like that. to,
Okay, for housing, I know there is a trans-owned halfway house. I stayed with them for a couple months once when I was a sex worker, when I needed a break from sex work. They're called New Dimensions, and it is a halfway house system that's owned by a trans person. So it's
okay.
not free, there's still a small financial barrier that's a lot for some homeless people,
Mhm,
but they are trans friendly and
mhm.
trans.
Well, that's good to know. We should take a look and see if we can find New Dimensions. Um,
On 16th Street in McDowell, so somewhere over there.
oh, right in my old neck of the woods. Okay, good to know. All right, well, I'm not seeing any more questions. And again, let's see, thank you for sharing your story, Lily. When my daughter came out, my sister asked what she should do. I said, love my kid, and said she had never known a trans person. I told her she had definitely known trans people, but they passed or weren't out
Sure.
because
Like
of
that
our
in every-
society. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have a friend that I actually met through the advocacy work that we do with Secular AZ. It was last year, and it was specifically about the trans care ban that would have prohibited any kind of gender affirming care for anybody under the age of 18. And that was when, oh gosh, now I'm going to blank on his name. I can picture him. He's in Mesa, but he would every once in a while vote right. I think he was in Mesa, or wait, no, it's Paul something. He's in North Phoenix. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He would, he was the one vote that kind of blocked that anti-trans bill. But I met a family there, and the young girl would speak fiercely to various committees. I was so impressed, and we've all become friends. They live close to us, and they left Texas when all of this was coming down in Texas, and now here they are considering leaving, watching very closely the 2024 election, to see what happens, because they may be uprooting the family and moving again, depending on what happens in 2024. So like the fact that human rights organizations have issued travel advisories for places like Florida and Tennessee is enough that all of us should be waking up, because when you look at Nazi Germany, the marginalized group that they started with was trans folks. Mars has a comment. Each marginalized group has to fight for their freedom separately. Black women, gay men, gay women, trans. We can't seem to carry over any of the lessons that we learn. No kidding. We kind of do work in silos. Yep.
Let me, what were you saying? Okay, let me add to what you were saying too, though. If you meet other trans people who are thinking of fleeing as laws become more oppressive, it's good to know that there are cities in other states that have passed trans refuge laws to prepare for the possibility of events like that.
Do you happen to know a few of those states or cities that have declared themselves sanctuary states or cities?
I'm sure Minneapolis is one. Their city council is hella gay.
Hell,
No, off the top of my head, I don't, but I would be shocked if Minneapolis wasn't one of them. I thought I saw them pass something like that a while back.
now, Minnesota in general is a fairly progressive state. Michigan was recently flipped, I think, in the last election cycle, both legislatively and congressionally. So there is some silver lining here. I mean, I see every day these QAnon evangelical conspiracy theorists kind of imploding on themselves and pointing to rhinos. So I think that the Republican Party seems to be cannibalizing itself. But I'll tell you what, the thing that I'm more worried about, because everybody's like, oh my gosh, look at the Republicans are not fundraising. Look at how terrible their fundraising is. But we all need to remember that Turning Point USA is right in our backyard, based in Scottsdale, and they have coffers like you wouldn't believe. And the reason why we saw so many of these, kind of fascist school board members get elected is because they've received training, they've received money, they've received tutelage from places like Turning Point USA and other extremist groups like that, who still somehow have a nonprofit designation.
And
Here's
they're
another
still
one
flush with
too.
funds.
I'm sorry, Lily, go ahead. I didn't hear you.
Oh, I said, and they're still flush with funds. I'd like to add one to that, although I'm sure you know about it. Maybe some of your people don't. And that's the Alliance Defending Freedom. They're active not just in hate groups in Arizona and the US, but they have an international scope. And their headquarters is in Vienna. And luckily, I speak German, and I've talked to anti-fascists in Germany and said, hey, find out what you can on these people and what they're doing on the international headquarters, because all of it's going to be in German since they're headquartered in Vienna.
That's true. Mars also has a little comment here, the Hi Dad Project for a local secular-ish group supporting LGBTQ plus youth. Good to know. So Hi Dad Group is another one, the hidadproject.org for those of you who are interested. Thanks again, Lindsay, for always being on top of things.
There's also, I mean, for supporting trans youth, there's our friend Tammy's organization in the East Valley, AZ Typo.
Oh, right. I love them. Tammy is great. Tammy Stoss is who you're talking about, right?
Correct.
Yeah, she's fantastic. A huge advocate. I'm sure I'll see her again too, because she was at the last Rainbows Festival, so I'm sure I'll see her again at the next Pride Festival. And with that, I don't have any further questions. So what gives you hope on a Friday as we go into the weekend, Lily?
There's still time to make a difference.
There is still time to make a difference. Let's hope. All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. I appreciate it. And thank you so much, Lily, for reaching out to us, for always participating in our speaker series and for all the knowledge that you dropped on us today.
Appreciate your time too.
Anytime. All right. Take care, everybody. Have a great weekend. Stay cool out there.
Ciao.